Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Facts on the Ground. My name is Misty Winston. Unfortunately, my co host is having internet issues, so you're stuck with me again. Sorry about that. But not just me. We actually have an amazing guest who is a longtime friend of mine on Twitter and host of The Bitter Pill, which is an excellent show that you should totally be subscribed to across all platforms. And he also has a Medium blog that you can check out, which we will link to all of that stuff in the show notes. But today we are very happy to welcome Jeff Melton to the show. How are you today, Jeff? Thanks so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me on, Misty. Yeah, it's great to be on. Always fun to talk to you. Well,
Yeah.
usually it's just tweet to you, but
Right. And you were kind enough to have me on your show a while back, so I definitely
yeah,
appreciate that. But why don't you
yes. We,
tell
we, we talked about your cult, the Julian Assange cult.
who knew that I was a really nefarious cult leader all this time? It's amazing. I'm learning new things about myself from perfect strangers on Twitter every day. It's great. But yeah, so why don't you tell everybody a little bit about your show, because you do amazing work over there. I've been a long time viewer. So just tell everybody a little bit about your show, why you got it started, what kind of things you're covering over there, that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, it came out of basically just having a background in all sorts of different issues. I've been an activist since the early 80s, got started with Central America solidarity work and anti-apartheid stuff, and just moved on to pretty much every issue you can imagine from there. And I'm also a psychologist, a social psychologist. So basically, everything you see happening politically is something that's driven by one or another social or social cognitive process, or a combination of them. So I come at it from that angle, and so the name "The Bitter Pill" comes out of the fact that the world, it sucks. It's full of bitter pills of truth that people are reluctant to swallow. That's obviously a psychological phenomenon. People would rather sort of whistle past the graveyard, so to speak, or would rather not admit to themselves how fucked up things are. And people have a tendency to believe they know more about what's happening than they do, and they're very, very firmly convinced that they're right. So cognitive dissonance, is thus another issue that I've taken up in one or another show. In fact, I had 3 episodes ago, I focused on how that accounts for a lot of the leftist infighting that we see, because I'm sure you've seen a lot of old movies. You remember Life of Brian. They had the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front, battling at each other. That was back in 1979. They were satirizing the enormous divisiveness that we see on the left. And one issue that I have at times covered in my show that I don't think too many other people in independent media cover is animal rights issues. I've been a vegan since the late 90s and an animal rights activist. And, there are a couple of reasons why I think that's important for those of us, who are, activists fighting for a better world, should pay attention to, what we eat and so forth. One of them is that in terms of its contribution to climate change, animal agriculture is second only to the fossil fuel industry. And if you look at the overall spectrum of environmental issues, well, I mean, you live in Ohio, an agricultural state, so you know about this. The water quality there sucks. My sister lives in Toledo, and they couldn't drink the water there for like 2 months one year recently. So overall, it's just a huge environmental issue. And as a socialist, someone who's against capitalism, I'm against exploitation. And well, animals can't form a union. They can't effectively fight back against whoever's exploiting them. So they're the most exploited beings on the planet, and they feel just like we do. So they suffer enormously, and so that's something that we as leftists ought to take into consideration, as moral individuals. So
Yeah. I did actually want to kind of go back just a little bit to when you were
okay,
talking about your background in like psychology, because I've been fascinated in that stuff for as long as I can remember. And you were talking about kind of cognitive dissonance, and I talk about this all the time. That one of the issues that we face moving forward is that getting people to understand how propagandized they have been throughout their
yeah,
lives is a really difficult thing because
yeah,
it's from birth, you are kind of brainwashed in this country to have a certain perspective on, our country and our history and all of those things. And I think that, coming to terms with that and kind of grappling with the fact that everything that you ever thought or ever believed about, your country, your history, everything has been a lie. I think that's a really
yeah,
enormous thing for people to deal with.
yeah,
So I'm very interested in your perspective, given that you have a background in this. How do you think moving
yeah.
forward that we can kind of help people come to terms with that and kind of come to terms with reality and move forward in a way where they can recognize the level of propaganda that they have been subjected to.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess the first step probably is for people to learn to be willing to admit they're wrong about things, or that they don't know as much as they think they do, and you just be open-minded. In the episode that I was mentioning, on cognitive dissonance recently, I talked about a couple of specific examples of people on the left that had been going back and forth at each other for several months, and you and I both know some of them. And people just kind
Yes.
of dig in their heels and refuse to concede that they might be wrong about something. And you finally, Jordan Chariton admitted that he was wrong to have said that people who promoted whatever theory about the election should be censored. So I guess that's good for him. He finally admitted it. So I think that's the first step towards building a more informed and unified movement, is people being willing to say, hey, as Albert Ellis, the famous therapist, once said, we're all fallible, fucked up human beings, and we need to accept that fact about us, and be very willing to admit, hey, I can screw up, I can be wrong, and maybe you know something that I don't, so maybe I could learn from you. So that's step number one. And of course, another, like a major component of how propaganda works is simply just hammering something that's false home over and over and over and over again. And there's actually studies on this, that the more people hear something repeated, that's totally made up and false, the more they believe that it's true. Independent of anything else. A nice controlled experiment where they simply varied how often something was repeated, and directly correlate with how much people believed that whatever it was true. So we have to sort of break down how our being misinformed about things works.
Yeah, and that's in my activism with free speech and free press, that's kind of always been my kind of my biggest thing, is that this whole battle is really over narrative control, and that's why, to me, the fight for free speech and free press is the most important issue, because you cannot fight for anything else if you don't have the ability to put out reliable information and have those conversations. And so when you were talking about how if you just repeat something over and over again, I think that's why it's such a crucial issue. And I know that you've been a long time supporter of Julian Assange, and there was an article just released today about the Biden administration fully intends to go forward with this appeal. And I was really I knew that it was a long shot. Come on, it's Joe Biden. I honestly had more hope that Donald Trump would do something than I did for Joe Biden. But I thought maybe maybe they'll just let it go. Like they'll just, they have until Friday, to kind of present their case for the appeal. So I was hoping, well, maybe they'll just kind of like let it quietly just go away.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem to be the case. So
Yeah. Like, didn't Biden call Julian Assange a terrorist or something?
High-tech terrorist. That's the exact
Yeah.
same terminology that Mitch McConnell used, by the way. So yeah, that's another kind of key issue I wanted to talk to you about. Like moving forward with the Biden administration, what do you think is going to happen in terms of the left and this kind of battle for, I guess, just the narrative, like, and moving forward, how are we going to fight back against the Biden administration in terms of free speech, free press, and getting, our issues pushed to the forefront with somebody like Joe Biden?
Yeah, that's tough. People would like, cognitive dissonance again when people, commit to, like electing a particular political candidate, even if they know there's things wrong with that candidate, they want to feel justified in having done that. So, it's, that obviously sets in motion a process where people find it hard to admit just how screwed up this person that they elected is. So like we didn't have much success when Obama was president getting very many people to recognize it. At least, I mean, eventually we did see some pushback with Occupy Wall Street and, Black Lives Matter and so forth, recognizing that just because you have a black president doesn't mean you don't still have an oppressive police state, just institutional racism that, in fact, this black president or, half black president is supporting. So, maybe we'll have better luck with, somebody who's a known, racist white dude. We'll see. But
that's what I find kind of interesting. The mental gymnastics that people are willing to do right now to justify voting for somebody like Joe Biden has been really interesting for me to witness, because these are people who are otherwise very intelligent. They know what's going on, but they're still willing to kind of lie to themselves and justify voting for, a pathological liar, a known racist, a segregationist, the guy who wrote the crime bill, who supported the Iraq war, not just supported it, but like really helped push it. And the mental, and I get it, like the whole lesser of two evils. But at some point, when is enough enough? Does that make sense? Like, when is it going to be the time when we're like, okay, this lesser of two evils thing isn't working out for us, clearly. You know what I mean? Like, what do you think kind of the psychology behind that is, where people just cannot seem to grasp that this, doing the same thing over and over again is not working for us? It's just not.
Yeah, well, I mean, a whole bunch of things. I already talked about how, people having a certain amount of investment in somebody they voted for and, maybe campaigned for, how that plays a role. And also just, obviously a lot of what's wrong with politicians in the system is carefully kept hidden from us. And, they're also very good, as Matt Taibbi has talked about a lot, at pitting the two quote unquote sides against each other and, redirecting people's energy or dissatisfaction into hating people other than who they should be hating, or only some of the people they should be maybe not hating but recognizing as the problem. So I guess one good thing about Trump not being in office or even much of a public presence anymore, since he's off of social media, is maybe people will stop talking so much about him and, focusing on him as a problem. And, maybe they'll recognize that it's more systemic. We'll see. And I know there was some other thing that I was getting to, but I can't remember what it was.
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I wrote the other day sort of jumping off from what Caitlin Johnstone said about electoral politics as being sort of like they're constantly like in a dementia ward. They're constantly redirecting patients who want to escape and go home, quote unquote. They're like, don't you want to have a meal first before you go? And so they'll get them to sit down and eat something. Then of course they'll forget what they wanted to do earlier. And she says, well, the way we're propagandized is kind of like that. They're constantly redirecting us to something else other than what the real root of problems is. And so, what I said, in response to that is, well, yes, that's a great analogy. But also, just, in reality, electoral politics is, I don't know if you've ever heard of the games that psychologists and others have studied called prisoner's dilemma games or social dilemma games, where, the basic paradigm for the two-person social dilemma, the prisoner's dilemma, is that, if two prisoners cooperate and don't snitch on each other, then, that works out pretty well for both of them. But the catch is that if they turn state's evidence against the other guy, they'll get a very light sentence and the other person will get the book thrown at them. So there's a tremendous incentive for people to defect and stab their fellow prisoner in the back rather than cooperating and both getting off with a sort of moderate sentence. And, you can look at our electoral system the same way. If we all cooperated, so to speak, and voted for decent politicians, then, maybe we'd get decent politicians elected. That would be better for everybody. But instead, the defecting choice is vote for the lesser evil, whichever one you think it is, and different people have different opinions about that. So, whichever one of these lesser evils or greater evils, whichever gets elected, either way we get screwed. And, the other thing that they keep hidden from us, besides the fact that actually, this or that third party person is a lot better politically than the people that they want us to choose between. But also, of course, that there's life politically outside of the electoral system. And, most of the major changes that happen come about through activism outside of the electoral arena. And, they don't want us to know about that. So
100%. Yes. Yes. I say that all the time. People, and listen, I don't necessarily have an issue with people, trying to, do whatever they can within the electoral system, but that's not where change comes from. I mean, that's, you really, we've seen that. I mean, if you just look at the squad, the whole point of us supporting them, getting them elected, that the whole thing was that they were going to go in there and challenge the Democratic Party establishment. That was the point. And they haven't done that at all. They go after Republicans all the time, but that's easy. Like, that's low hanging fruit. Everybody can do that. Everybody on the left or even like center left knows that Republicans are trash. So, the whole point was for them to go in and kind of challenge the Democratic establishment, which is every bit as corrupt as the Republican Party. Yeah. So, that's 100%. Yes, I totally agree with you. But I also wanted to kind of touch on where, you said that they keep us very much focused on things that are not the root of the issue. They keep us angry at, people that are not really the problem. And I know that you recently interviewed Magnus, the Boogaloo Boy, who caused an unbelievable uproar. It was like a lot of hyperbolic hyperventilating going on. And so Jesse and I also interviewed him. I've spoken to him on Twitter. I've done a lot of research into the Boogaloo Boys. I've talked to people who have worked on the ground with them. What do you think about this unbelievable just drama that this this one person has caused, because to me it seems just really ridiculous. I mean, I understand that there's a narrative about this group out there and that people are very susceptible to, they hear, oh, they're white supremacists, but to me it's like, anytime that there's that level of propaganda against a group, I'm immediately suspect. Like, I immediately want to know more. So, what has been, and you've spoken to him, you've seen all of the drama going on. What is your perspective on, this whole outrage and just absolute hysteria over this one dude and his group? Because it's really fascinating to me,
it's crazy. But if I could, I just wanted to say one more thing about the electoral politics stuff, and then I'll get to that. I actually ran as a Green Party candidate for Congress back in 2002. And of course I wasn't expecting to win, and obviously I didn't. But the way I see third party politics is, if we can't form a viable third party, which, I mean, it did happen once in the history of the United States, right? The Republican Party was originally a third party, and it's happened in Canada and the UK and a number of other countries, and that has actually led to some significant changes. But, barring that, running as an outsider, an outside party, provides us with a platform with which we can speak to various issues and raise consciousness about them. And even though the Green Party has certainly not succeeded at the national level, although they've elected local and some state officials over the years, what they have done is do things like introduce the original Green New Deal. Be among the first people to, bring issues of marijuana or drug legalization or gay marriage to the public's attention. Back in the day, things like abolition of slavery and women's suffrage were major issues that third parties took up and were able to successfully help put the issue on the table, so to speak. And played a role in change. But anyway, getting back to Magnus and the Boogaloo Boys, I was telling Magnus when I talked to him, this really what's happening with you guys reminds me very much of what happened. What always happens, when somebody is, presenting a very different point of view. It happened with Ralph Nader's campaign back in 2000. It happened with Tulsi Gabbard when she was running on a anti-war and anti-censorship, pro-civil liberties platform in the Democratic primaries. Just this massive establishment smear campaign against her, and unfortunately joined in by a lot of people who at least claim to be on the left. And, same with what's happening now with, Magnus and the Boogaloo Boys. This guy who's, like a lot of his comrades in the group, anti-police brutality, pro, abolishing ICE, anti-war, pro-civil liberties in general, and on, is portrayed as a fascist or a Nazi. And, a lot of people are buying into this, and it's like, they're libertarians, right? How do libertarian and Nazi square with each other? How does that make any sense to say that a libertarian's a fascist? I don't get it.
Well, these words get thrown around. I don't think people even know what they mean. Nazi, fascist. It's really like everybody's a fascist now. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, or Tulsi's a Republican, even though she's like, granted she's in the Democratic Party and, all Democrats have their limitations politically, but, she's as progressive as anybody gets in the Democratic Party. And yet she's constantly labeled as a Republican or pro-Trump or, whatever. And it's like no relationship to reality. So
Yeah, it's it's the same. I get that too. People call me a fascist and a Nazi all the
Yeah.
time. And I'm like, I mean, I support workers' co-ops and legalization
Mhm.
of sex work and drugs, and I'm anti-ICE and anti-cops, and I'm a prison abolitionist and a free speech activist. And I mean,
Yeah.
anybody calling a free speech activist a fascist is really just a level of stupid I cannot even comprehend. That just doesn't
Yeah.
even make any sense.
Yeah.
But
Well, a lot of,
it's
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Yeah, a lot of it, is just this, thing that a lot of people have been brainwashed to believe that, we have these two teams, the Democrats and the Republicans, the liberals and the conservatives. So, if you're against one, you must be for the other, right? If you're against, Hillary Clinton, you must be a Trump supporter. I got this from all kinds of people, you know, uh, over the years that, recent years. While you're constantly criticizing Clinton and Obama and so forth, I don't hear you criticize Trump very much. Are you pro-Trump or what? I was like, well, no, actually, I've criticized Trump a lot, but I already know Trump's bad, and most of the people that I talk to already know Trump's bad. But a lot of you, including you that are talking to me right now, don't understand just how bad the Democrats are. So I'm going to try to tell you. Um, but that doesn't mean I'm pro-Republican.
Right. No, it's, this amazing, there's no gray area. These people have no ability or concept of nuance. They have no, it's one or the other. You're right. It's very much like a team sport. You're either on team red or you're on team blue. There's no in between. And, that you can't have any kind of outside conversation that, doesn't fall in line with that. And,
Yeah.
it's very, exhausting to deal with, honestly. And with the Boogaloo Boys, like I honestly didn't know that much about them before. I mean, I'd heard of them, but I really hadn't paid much attention really, until Jimmy had Magnus on. And, when I heard him talk, I'm like, oh, okay, well, well, I mean, I saw his speech outside the Michigan Capitol first, I
Yeah.
guess. And then Jimmy had him on.
Yeah.
But I was like, I agree with everything this guy's saying. Why are people so freaked out? Like, I don't understand. So I like, this is what I do. And this is what everybody should do. I like started researching,
Yeah.
like I started looking into it for myself. And, I started, asking people on the ground who have, been at protests where the Boogaloo Boys are. And, for the most part, everything that I'm hearing is that these are people who will put their bodies in between cops and Black Lives Matter protesters or cops and Antifa protesters. And to me, anybody who's willing to put their body on the line for my comrades is okay in my book. I mean, we can have disagreements. I mean, everybody's like, oh, but they're libertarians. You can't, like, if you're, on the left, you can't agree with libertarians. I mean, to me, having a disagreement on the economic structure of the country moving forward doesn't matter until we deal with the fact that we live under an oligarchy and this oppressive regime where we can't even have that conversation until we deal with that.
Yeah.
So it's this really weird thing where people and again, these are otherwise intelligent human beings who know how
Hmm.
propaganda works. They've seen it. The same stuff's used against Black Lives Matter. The same stuff is
Hmm.
used against Antifa. Like it's
Yeah.
the same kind of propaganda. And
Yeah.
it's really bizarre to me that like grown ass adults can't take a step back and be like, okay, well, let me take a look at this myself and do some research and figure out, what all this is. And it's really bizarre.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, as I was telling Magnus, when I had him on, it's, this reminds me of how your right wingers react, think about and treat Muslims. It's like, well, they know that there's ISIS and Al Qaeda and right wing religious fundamentalists, so all Muslims must be like that. Um, and let's grant for the sake of argument that there's some people like that in the Boogaloo Boys. I don't know that there are people who are legitimate Boogaloo Boys who are what the group as a whole has been labeled as. But let's suppose that there are. Does that mean that the whole group is like that? you know, um,
yeah.
no.
I mean, there are
Um,
racists on the left. Like
yes.
racism is a legitimate problem on the left. So does that mean everybody on the left is now racist and like a Nazi? Of course not. That's
Yeah.
ridiculous. Like there's an asshole in every group. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like That's just the
Yeah,
nature
I
of the
mean,
beast.
yeah, like liberal imperialism. What the hell is that if not racist? It's overwhelmingly black and brown people who are on the receiving end of our, um, you know, imperialism. Um, and that's racist at its core, and it's supported overwhelmingly by politicians in both parties and by most of the people who vote for them. So, you know,
Yeah, 100%. I think actually that's a great point because that's another thing I wanted to talk to you about. It seems to me like, among other things, there are many things that divide the left, but one of the major things that I see being like a huge division in the left is imperialism. It seems to
yeah,
me that there are these kind of like hipster liberals who are very focused on, Medicare for all, or, well,
hmm
they talk about it. They're not willing to like push the squad to actually fight for it, but they like to talk about it a lot. But they do not care or talk about imperialism at all. At all. You never see
yeah,
these people discussing, the
yeah.
drone program or the wars that
Yeah.
we're
I
in.
defer to
Have
caucus
you,
leadership.
you call them what?
I defer to caucus leadership.
Oh, on a
Yeah, what
coup.
AOC
And
said
then
about
I'm not an
Venezuela.
expert on these things. That was so gross to me. She has a degree in foreign relations and she
Really?
went on, yes, she has a double major, or maybe it's international relations, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
But but she went on, I forget, I think it was ABC or something. And when they asked her about Venezuela, that she literally was like, I'm not an expert on these things. Are you kidding? Like, I'm not an expert either. I know coups are bad. That's not a difficult thing. That's not hard. Like, I think most
Yeah.
people with, two brain cells could put that together. But yeah, it seems like, there that seems to be like a huge division. Is that something that you have noticed too? And
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
how we overcome that. Like, how do we,
Yeah.
because it seems like this is like a huge sticking point in moving forward.
Yeah, yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think there's a combination of things going on. I think there, most likely, as there always have been, there are infiltrators on the left who are, trying to convince people of things that are not correct. And, despite the fact that most people who claim to be on the left do watch alternative media, they also, get enough, absorb enough of the propaganda that, they start to think in that way somewhat. And, there's just been, not a whole lot of critique of imperialism in the media over the last few years, not to the extent that there was, back when, Bush was president or Clinton was president. Um, and just again, people being very set in their ways and convinced they're right and unwilling to acknowledge that hey, maybe these people who were saying that you know uh, the U.S. directly or indirectly intervening in the Syrian civil war isn't a good thing, and that doesn't mean that they're Assadists anymore than people who were against the Iraq War were supporters of Saddam Hussein. Um, so, yeah,
It's
it's
amazing that you have to say that. Like, you have to say that, you know, the US, you know, involving themselves in other people's and other countries' business doesn't mean that you support that country's leader, government, nothing. Like, it's that thing where, there's no nuance, and if you don't follow the narrative, then you must be an Assad supporter, or you must
yeah,
be a Putin, Putin's buddy.
yeah,
It's really bizarre to me. And I realize that it's, the propaganda game in this country is really strong. My good friend Steve Poikonen says all the time that the United States is by far the most propagandized country on earth.
yeah,
But it's really, I think something that I've noticed, especially over the past 4 years, and this is something else that I really wanted to like get your take on, is that, we expect it from mainstream media, right? Like, everybody knows that mainstream media is terrible. It's state-run propaganda. Of course, they're going to be, awful. But we've now started to see over the past 4 years, and, really, really bad over the past 4 years, but
yeah,
for longer than that. But independent media is even starting to do that nonsense. I mean, you have like the Young Turks pushing Russiagate, and you have Mike Figueredo pushing Russiagate, and you have, they all slam Tulsi, and it
yeah.
How frustrating is that for you to watch? Because for me, it's unbelievably frustrating because, these are people that proclaim to be independent journalists and that they're progressives and all of this stuff. And that's part of the reason why we have so many on the left being just so completely misinformed. And,
Yeah.
now that you are in the independent media space, is that part of the reason why you started a channel? I know it's part of the reason why
Oh,
I started,
definitely.
appearing on camera.
Yeah.
And, what can we do about this? Because it's a huge problem.
Yeah, yeah. It's totally very frustrating and definitely a motivating factor for me. You know, trying to have a more public presence. Although I've always tried, it's just not succeeded. But yeah, it was very frustrating for me personally to see Democracy Now, which had been
Oh,
such an important presence in the anti-war movement. They were like the War and Peace Report, the anti-war channel for so long, and then you know, gradually that changed, and yeah, Amy Goodman still does some good work. She became a vegan and took up the cause of animal rights just a few years ago, which that good for her. But in terms of foreign policy, Democracy Now kind of sucks now.
yes.
And
It's heartbreaking. It's
yeah,
heartbreaking.
yeah,
And I still do love Amy Goodman. I will always love Amy Goodman. But watching her decline over the past few years has been truly heartbreaking.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
it's really
for sure.
bad.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I heard her speak in person once, and she was very inspiring. And unfortunately, that's changed in a lot of ways. But I think a big part of the problem is that a lot of so-called independent media are not so independent anymore. I know Democracy Now gets, I think they get funding from like the Soros Foundation or something, and of course TYT got all that money from from the Katzenberg Foundation, which is tied to the establishment Democrats. Of course, The Intercept is owned by a billionaire who's very much a centrist Democrat, Piero Midyar. Betsy Reed came from The Nation, which has always been sort of as a friend of mine from grad school put it, post Cold War liberals. They're not super left. Never have been. Um, so yeah, a lot of what we think of as independent media is kind of one foot in an independent perspective and one foot in the Democratic Party and the establishment. And unfortunately, that's true with some of our supposed left or socialist organizations, DSA. There are definitely good people in DSA. What's her name? Natalia Tylam and some of the folks in her local DSA chapter have been very instrumental in defending Tara Reid and trying to bring that to the fore. But the majority of the leadership in DSA is like, hey, let's elect more Justice Democrats. That's the solution to everything, right?
Yeah.
And even in the organization that I've been a part of since the early '90s, or off and on a part of, Solidarity. Which the reason that I was drawn to it in the first place was that I was won over to a central part of their perspective that we should have independent politics. We should not tie our political perspective or our activism to any capitalist party. That we should act outside of the two-party system. And unfortunately, over the years, especially in the last 5 or 6 years, a lot of folks in that group were like, "Hey, wow, isn't Bernie Sanders great?"
Yeah.
And they're more critical of him than the majority of his supporters, but I'd say roughly half of them, at least to some extent, have you know, been supporters of his campaigns. Some of the folks in Solidarity left, joined DSA, and for all the wrong reasons. And Yeah, it's frustrating. And then we see this shit with the People's Party where
Oh,
you know, um, I don't really know what the hell's going on there, but it doesn't sound good. Um,
no. This is I think the problem is really, and I think that a lot of people fail to recognize this, is that the left is always going to have to deal with co-op being co-opted,
co-optation.
infiltrators.
Yeah,
The right doesn't really have to deal with that because the establishment is right and they are fine with moving to the right. And
yeah,
so there's never going to be an attempt to sabotage that. There's always going to be an attempt to sabotage the left. Always, always,
yeah.
always, always. And so, it's these people, and I think that's one of the biggest things that I have found frustrating, just because I don't ever like label myself. I'm not like somebody who's going to join a party. I'm not like, I don't do that stuff.
Mhm.
But people, they join these teams and then it's like they refuse to look objectively. They refuse to criticize those people. It becomes this cult of personality. We see it with the Squad. We see it with Bernie Sanders. I mean, you can't criticize anything that they do. And it's this really weird thing where it's not like we don't have historical reference where the left
Mhm.
needs to be mindful and aware of this is something that can happen. And you have to be vigilant all the time. I mean, you
Yeah,
have to be paying attention constantly and, watching your back. It sucks. It's
yeah,
exhausting, but that's just the
yeah,
reality of it.
yeah.
And with the People's Party, I honestly don't really know what's going on, specifically. But it's just for them to be this new and falling apart this fast is, I mean, it's kind of telling. I mean, it really is just kind of
Yeah,
telling that, they
yeah.
can't even, and it took 4 years for them to even like come up with a name. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? I
yeah,
don't know. That's a whole other ball of wax, I think. But
yeah,
um, yeah, I don't
yeah,
know. It is just really frustrating to watch people kind of box themselves in.
yeah,
If that makes sense. Like if you're a
yeah.
Bernie supporter, then that's it. Anybody that criticizes Bernie, they'll attack you. And that, this cult of personality thing is really damaging.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, I don't know how to work people up to that. I really,
Yeah, yeah, it's really frustrating. It seems very hard to get across to people the distinction between why we're critical of people like Bernie and the Squad that look, they say a lot of nice things and they often vote the right way, but ultimately they're not fighting for us. They're selling us out on, a whole host of issues that I can name and tell you exactly what they did to sell us out. Whereas okay, there are things that I could criticize about, you know, Magnus and the Boogaloo Boys. There are things I could criticize about, the Green Party, Howie Hawkins or whoever. But, ultimately, um, these are people that, there's a lot of really fundamental things that we agree with them on, and we need to learn to set aside some of those differences and cooperate on the things that we have in common. And one of the things that just drove me up the wall with it was mainly Bernie supporters who did this with Tulsi Gabbard. It's like she's
oh,
not meant for Medicare for all. It's like uh, no, what you mean is she's not for Bernie's particular version of Medicare for all. Um, well, she supports a public option, and that's bad. It's like, well, no, you're mixing up public option and private option. Those are two different things. Public option means it's optional for you to pay taxes on uh, public health insurance. What Tulsi wants to do is have give people the option of purchasing private health insurance, but they still have to pay fucking Medicare for taxes, just like they do in Australia, just like they do in Canada, and many other places, which they all call their system Medicare, and it's a publicly funded system, and everybody has to pay into it, regardless of whether they have private insurance or not. So, as Jimmy Dore said, yeah, I prefer Bernie's plan to Tulsi's, but you know, Tulsi's is still 10,000% better than what we've got now. You can look at Australia, which has a very similar system to what Tulsi proposed, only Tulsi's proposal was actually better because it covered more. And see, hey, their healthcare system is vastly superior to ours. So let's put aside this minor difference that we don't like this healthcare policy as well as that one, and recognize the fundamental fact that either one of those policies, if it were implemented, would break the stranglehold of private multinational corporations over our healthcare system. Either one would do that.
Yes, and that's another thing, is that the people seem to struggle with the fact that you can look at things like issue by issue. Just because you agree with somebody on one thing doesn't mean you're going to agree with them on everything. And just because you disagree with somebody on one thing doesn't mean, I come across this all the time where if you, like, for example, I will praise Tulsi for her stance on Julian Assange and Edward Snowden and the Espionage Act and civil liberties. And then all of a sudden people are like,
you're a Tulsi stan.
Yes. And I'm like, no, actually, I have lots of issues with Tulsi. I've criticized her. I mean, lots. Like, you can go back through my Twitter feed. I criticize her all the time.
Yeah.
I just happen to agree with her on this issue. And it's people, there's no ability for them to separate that out. And if you agree with somebody on one thing, then all of a sudden, or for example, if you have somebody on your show, then that means you co-sign everything they've ever said and they've ever done. And that's
or if you
ridiculous.
go on somebody's show.
Yes.
Or like Jimmy
Dore, you go on Fox
Fox
News and all of a sudden you're a right winger.
Yeah.
Oh, so frustrating.
Well, I mean, I know you.
Goes on Tucker Carlson to talk about Julian Assange, and all of a sudden he's like a secret fascist or something. Really?
Yeah.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
I know you in your work for Julian Assange, you've worked with Cassandra Fairbanks, whose politics, generally speaking, are pretty terrible.
I don't like her.
Yeah, but you agree. She agrees wholeheartedly with you on this one specific issue: civil liberties.
100%. Yeah. Yes. And she's a great fighter for Julian Assange. And so on this issue, she's on my team, and that's okay. We can disagree on everything else, but if something means something to you, whether it's Julian Assange or Medicare for all or ending the wars, if somebody agrees with you, you should be willing to work with them to achieve that goal. If it really means something to you, then you should be willing to do that and set aside your differences for just that thing. It doesn't seem like it's that complicated of an issue to do. And that's honestly, I will say that my activism in the Assange movement, and specifically with Action for Assange, has really opened my eyes to the fact that post-partisan activism is not only possible, it is 100% necessary. If you really care about something, and there are people who you may disagree with on other things, who are willing to fight with you for that thing, you should be willing to fight with them too. If it really matters to you, then you should be willing to set aside some differences. And I'm not saying like people, I'm not working with fascists. I don't want to work with fascists either. Like, I'm not going to go and like seek out fascists to work with. And most fascists aren't going to be fighting for Julian Assange. So it's really not an issue. But yeah, it's this bizarre thing where, again, there's no nuance, there's no gray area. It's, you're in your box and that's it. And if you can't step outside that box. And to me, that's very clearly what the establishment, the oligarchy, the people in power, that's exactly what they want. You know what I'm saying? They want us fighting amongst ourselves and not working together.
Yeah. This constantly comes up that, whoever goes on Fox News is automatically bad. It's like, oh, well, why? Okay, if they were going to go on Tucker's show, why didn't they spend the 2 minutes that they had to talk to him, confronting him about immigration? It's like, well, because they were invited to talk about an issue on his show that he agrees with them on, that's just as important as immigration. And, they're not just talking to him, they're talking to millions and millions of people. He's the most popular, media personality in the United States. more people watch his show than anywhere else, and they've got an opportunity to talk to him about an issue that he agrees with them on, and therefore, they're more likely to influence their audience. So why in the world would Jimmy Dore or Glenn Greenwald or whoever, Tulsi Gabbard, who has an opportunity to go on that show, pass up that opportunity to collaborate with him on
Exactly.
speaking to
Yes.
millions of people about this issue?
That would be unbelievably stupid. The man gets 5 to 6 million viewers a night. And these are people who would otherwise maybe not be exposed to leftist ideas. And
Yeah.
anytime Jimmy Dore, Glenn Greenwald, Anya Parampil, Aaron Matei, Max Blumenthal, anytime any of them have ever gone on there, they're not going on there to talk about right-wing stuff or to agree with Tucker Carlson on, his immigration views. They're going on there to discuss leftist issues. Anya Parampil goes on there and talks about, anti-imperialism, and Glenn Greenwald goes on to talk about Julian Assange. And these are leftist issues. And these are issues that the Fox News viewership would likely never be exposed to otherwise.
Right.
And it would be unbelievably self-defeating to not totally take advantage of Tucker Carlson and exploit his massive platform to spread our ideas. It's this weird thing where people, do you want to win, or do you want to sit in your safe space and feel smugly superior? Do you know what I mean? How do you expect to change anybody's minds if you're not willing to have conversations with people you don't agree with? It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I don't get it.
If you're really on the left, do you not disagree with Rachel Maddow on an awful lot?
That's another thing. CNN. Why is it okay for everybody to go on MSNBC or CNN? That is gross propaganda. They're disgusting. They push Russiagate, they push wars, but it's okay to go on those networks, and it's okay.
Yeah.
And it's also okay for Bernie Sanders to go on Fox News, or for Nomiki Konst to go on Fox News. But if Glenn Greenwald does it, the left freaks the fuck out. The left, I should say, freaks the fuck out and crucifies him. The hypocrisy is astounding. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, it's like if you got invited to go on CNN or MSNBC, go on Rachel Maddow's show to talk about Julian Assange, would you pass that up because you can't stand Rachel Maddow and her politics?
Of fucking course not.
Yeah.
Oh. And people should be more angry about the fact that Tucker Carlson is the only person on cable news willing to have people on to talk about those issues. That should be the outrage. The outrage should be that MSNBC and CNN aren't inviting people like Glenn Greenwald or Max Blumenthal or Jimmy Dore on to talk about these things. They're supposed to be the left-leaning news networks, and they're not. When's the last time you saw Glenn Greenwald on MSNBC? Or it's been ages. I mean, they've never had Jimmy Dore on. I don't know if they've ever had Anya Parampil on, or Aaron Matei, or any of these other people. But I mean, come on, that, to me, that's more of an outrage than the fact that these people go on Tucker. I mean, why isn't MSNBC having these people on? Seems a little weird, suspect to me.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's it's really frustrating. It's the hypocrisy is just something that I'm somebody that, and I'm not perfect, for the love of God, I'm not perfect, but all I ask for is just consistency, just attempt some consistency. And they don't in any way. It's the same thing with force the vote. Either you care about Medicare for all or you don't. If you have an opportunity to use the little bit of leverage that you have and you're not willing to fight for it, then what are you doing? What are you doing?
Yeah. It's like DSA was like, oh yeah, we should force the vote on Medicare for all, but we don't want to do it when we actually have power. No, that's the wrong time to try to do it. What?
Oh. Yeah, that's why I call them hipster liberals, because they want to be left because it's cool. Bernie Sanders made it fashionable to be left. You know what I mean? He made it I'm a socialist, even though he's nowhere near a socialist. But they don't actually, they like to talk about it. It's like they're cosplaying. You know what I mean? They're actually liberals, but they think it's cool.
The boutique left.
Yes, and he's absolutely right. By the way, I love Richard Medhurst. He's so amazing. Oh, he's so good.
Have
He's
y'all
so
had
good.
one?
His rants are everything.
Yes.
They really are. They're really everything. I don't know if you saw the one that he just retweeted it. I think he did it. I think it's an old one though. The one he did about Neera Tanden. It's really good, and everybody should go check that out. It's pretty funny.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's vile.
Oh,
But yeah, these. I mean,
did
these.
they vote on her yet? Do you know?
I don't think so. They had like the question and answer thing today where, Republicans grilled her and Democrats didn't ask her any hard questions. But I
Of
think
course.
tomorrow is the
Of
actual
course.
decision. Yeah. Yeah, and that's I'm really interested to see how the Bernie dead enders react to this because he is going to vote for her.
Probably.
And I'm hoping that this will be kind of like the nail in the coffin surrounding the mythology of Bernie Sanders because I don't know how he can vote for her and escape unscathed by his supporters. But I don't know. The mental gymnastics that crew is willing to do are impressive. It's like gold medal Olympics level
Yes.
mental
Yeah.
gymnastics. So we'll
Yeah.
see how
Well,
that
I
plays
mean,
out. But I'm pretty sure that, yeah, I'm pretty sure tomorrow morning. I want to say they said it was at 10 a.m. is when
mhm,
it starts back up. But I'm not. I'd have to
mhm.
double check for sure on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I suspect it's going to go much like every other thousand times Bernie Sanders has sold us out since he's been in Congress. Some people will see it and be horrified and be disillusioned, and most people that still support him will, keep supporting him. But
Make
every little bit helps.
excuses.
Every little bit helps.
Yes. Yes. That's you know, I get it. Like I understand that people are desperate for somebody to believe in. They're
Yeah.
desperate for, somebody. I think people are just desperate. They want somebody to
Yeah.
fight for them. And,
Yeah.
Bernie Sanders said he was going to do that and then didn't.
Yeah.
And I get that that's hard to let go, but,
Yeah.
I say it all the time. Politicians are not your friends. Like,
Yeah.
please stop. Like, I don't understand this like cheerleading, hero worship. The People ask me all the time, is because I'm critical of every politician. Is any politician ever going to be good enough for you? No.
Yeah.
No. They
Yeah.
shouldn't be for you either. Like every
Yeah.
politician should be under scrutiny constantly. That you should be pushing back on them all the time. You should be holding them accountable all the time. You should be pressuring them all the time.
Yeah.
Politicians are not meant to be celebrities. They're not meant to be your friends. Don't cheerlead them. If they do something good, then, give them credit where it's due. But you should be constantly skeptical of them and their motivations.
Yeah.
No politician should ever be good enough for anybody, ever. That's the
Yeah.
way it's supposed to be. Like you're supposed to be super hypercritical all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just
Yeah.
the way
I
I
mean,
see it. So,
we look at politics in other countries. We see the French Socialist Party, the Spanish Socialist Party, the Social Democrats in Germany, even the Greens in Germany. One after another, they have sold out when they've gotten power. The Green Party in Germany, a lot of them are, not necessarily the rank and file German citizens, but the politicians who were in elected office largely supported the Iraq War and have, done, a number of other bad things. And we see this pattern over and over. Let's see. I think this book by Jeremy Brecker, Strike, talks about how, over and over you see this pattern with the labor movement where, when labor bureaucrats, get into power, they sell out and the union stops being militant. And, the militancy always comes from the rank and file. We see this over and over in history that the energy for social change comes from the grassroots. It doesn't come from the top.
yes. And I think people lose sight of the fact that you have to, if you genuinely want democracy, if you genuinely want a government that represents you, you have to fight for it every day. I mean,
Yeah.
you really do. Like the people in power are not, they're not going to represent you if they don't have to. They are going to represent their own interests. And if you are not willing to, constantly be watching them and keeping them accountable, and they're going to do what they're going to do. They're not there for you. They're really not. It's that's just the nature of the beast.
Yeah. Although, lest I sound like an anarchist, I should say that, in countries that have had revolutions, at least in some of them, Cuba comes to mind, China, some of the others, there's enough accountability there that, like, if the government just like sold out and went totally, capitalist, multinational corporations running everything, people would rebel in those countries. And so, you have, a decades-long history in, places like Cuba of, the government basically doing, a vastly better job of taking care of people, despite the fact that there are shortcomings, there is corruption and so forth. Nonetheless, there's still enough accountability there that, they're doing more for their people, in Venezuela and some of these other places than is the case in certainly the United States or even European countries.
That's actually really interesting, because I've talked about this with several different people, and I always wonder what happened to us, like in the United States, because if you look at like the formation of our country, it was based on rebellion. It was, what I mean? And it seems like the population is just now so just neutered. Like everybody is, they don't like, they're not paying attention. And I get that it's really kind of by design. Everybody has, they're forced to work 2 and 3 jobs, and they have their families, and they're, just barely getting by. And the propaganda game is super strong, and, nobody has enough time. If you want legitimate information in this country, you really have to go and like search it out. You can't just, go turn on CNN and get real information. But it makes me sad that the United States has gone from, this massive revolution against a oppressive, monarchy to what we are now. It's just really depressing that, people aren't willing to fight back anymore. At least it seems that way. I mean, we see glimpses of it, but, it's just sad. I just often wonder, what's it going to take?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but I mean, as far as the American Revolution, I mean, we do have to bear in mind that the leadership of that revolution was, the ruling class in the colonies at the time. And, a lot of regular folks, didn't necessarily side with the revolutionaries. They were screwed over, especially the slaves, obviously, regardless of whether the British monarchy or the American colonists were kind of running the show. I highly recommend to everybody, and I'm sure you've probably read this, Howard Zinn's book, People's History of the United States. Excellent general introduction to U.S. history from the point of view of the 99% of us, so to speak, that are oppressed and battling against various oppressive forces, whether it be men oppressing women or white people oppressing people of color, or the elite, the wealthy, oppressing the rest of us. There's always been people fighting back, and hopefully there always will be.
Yes. And as a side note too, after you read Howard Zinn's book, everybody should go read Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz's kind of similar book. It's called The Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. Howard Zinn actually requested that she write it. It's an amazing book. There's also a book that I actually got for my kids. It's like the young person's edition. Just makes it a little bit more palatable. Because talking about genocide is not always easy when you're talking to kids. So it just makes it a little bit more user-friendly for kids. But yeah, I mean, since, we're now homeschooling and everything, I've had an opportunity to kind of radicalize my kids a little bit. And so, we've been going through some of the stuff in that book. And I highly recommend both of them. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Also, there. I don't know if you're familiar with Dave Zirin. Um, I'm blanking on the title, but I got this from my son when he was little. I think it's something like a people's history of sports in the United States, and it talks about people like Muhammad Ali and um, uh, other figures in among athletes. The people at the 1968 Mexico Olympics and so forth that have you know been a very central part because they are public figures in you know radical struggles over the years. Yeah, I'll have to look up the title of it. But yeah, I highly recommend.
You
And
said his name is Dave Zirin.
yeah,
Zirin?
Zirin.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because that's I'm a big sports nerd, so I will totally be into that.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I
Uh,
have multiple books from athlete revolutionaries and all that stuff back here. So yeah, that's
yeah.
I'll definitely look into that too. Um, but yeah, I know that we've been going for a little bit over an hour. I appreciate you being so generous with your time. I did want to ask you though, like what do you have coming up on your channel? What kind of things are you working on? Do you have any, interviews lined up with people that we might want to check out? What's going on coming up?
Yeah. Well, I have ambitions of interviewing various people. I'd love to have Tara Reid on the show, and I've actually talked to her about it at one point, but we'll see. Um, a couple of recent episodes I did were on election integrity. Basically, as a social scientist, I know how to do statistics, so I did statistical analyses comparing the exit polls from the 2016 and 2020 general elections as well as primaries, comparing those with the actual results and finding, wow, lo and behold, there are big discrepancies, whereas there are no discrepancies between, for example, the 2016 Republican primary election results and the exit polls. So, and, because I've looked at the data, I disagree with the Convo Couch and some others about the 2020 general election, because the exit polls in fact show that Biden underperformed and Trump overperformed in the 2020 general election. So I don't want YouTube to ding your show, so I won't draw any
It's
conclusions
all
from
right.
that. But it looks like if anybody tried to cheat in the general election, and not that the Democrats didn't also try, but if anybody succeeded in rigging some votes or throwing some votes out or whatnot in the 2020 general election, it was more the Republicans than the Democrats. Um, Biden, in fact, legitimately won. Horrible as I think he is, he did. One interesting thing that's happened that is kind of unfortunate for those of us on the left who support an alternative to the two major parties is that polls have also shown that since Donald Trump entered into politics, the public has become more and more convinced that it makes a huge difference who gets elected president, meaning more and more people turn out to vote also in the 2018 midterm elections. There was a huge turnout. There was also a huge turnout this time, the biggest turnout in over 100 years, because, the red team and the blue team were convinced that it made a really huge difference, regardless of which team they were on, that their guy, that their team leader won. And conversely, the third parties did really horribly in this past election compared to what they did in 2016 or, some other elections. So, that suggests we've got our work cut out for us in convincing people that, hey, the Democrats aren't the solution or the Republicans aren't the solution. Because right now, people are really invested in this idea that it's going to make a huge difference that, their guy is in, if they're on the Democrat side. So.
Yeah,
that
well,
work.
I mean, I'm sure that I know. I mean, I know you disagree with the convo couch, but they're always up to having conversations about that.
Yeah,
So I mean, I'm sure that they would be willing to have you on, or maybe one of them could come on your show to discuss it.
yeah, yeah.
Because I don't. To me, my thing has never been. Um, uh, did Donald Trump rig it or did Joe Biden rig it? My point has
Mhm.
always been that if the election happened in the United States of America, it was not a legitimate election. Our
Yeah,
elections are
yeah,
horrible.
yeah.
They're terrible.
At the very least, in every single election, we have a huge amount of corporate media propaganda that hides the flaws of whichever candidate they support, or doesn't even let you hear about them. You couldn't even tweet the article from the New York Post about the emails on Hunter Biden's laptop that showed Biden as well as his son's corruption. You couldn't even talk about that. And in addition, irrespective of whether they you know interfered with the vote count itself, which I don't really know, the Democrats did definitely you know, throw the Green Party off of the ballot illegitimately in a number of states this election. So, yeah, definitely. There was some unfairness there
Well, and,
regarding
and
the
not to mention that Joe Biden wasn't even a legitimate nominee. I mean, the
right.
primary was very clearly rigged.
Yeah, yeah,
So, I
and
mean, it wasn't the election was, crap from from
yeah,
jump. It was, I mean, and that's something that I find extremely frustrating too, is that people, don't want to address election integrity at all. I mean, Tulsi
yeah,
Gabbard had a bill ready to
hmm
go. Is something
yeah,
that she's been talking about for ages, and people trashed her for it, and nobody wants to. I mean, that's Bernie Sanders, who got cheated in 2016, never talks about election integrity.
right,
Never. And
yeah,
to me, that's just really telling. I mean, dude,
yeah,
it's not even like it's a conspiracy theory or like it's like a rumor. We have hard evidence that
yeah,
you got
yeah,
cheated,
and
not
yeah,
once but twice. But for him to not talk about it after 2016 at all ever, um that's really telling to me.
yeah, yeah, and like I said, I did statistical analysis on all these exit poll versus actual election return results, and you know uh, the exit polls were off in this year's Democratic primaries by more than any of the others that I looked at. You know, Biden overperformed the exit polls by more than 3%, or about 3%, and Bernie underperformed the exit polls by well over 3%. I think it was about 4. So, something's going on there.
Yeah, no question. So is
Statewide.
that something, is this something that you're going to be doing like some shows on? Are you going to have are you going to be interviewing some people, or talking
Oh
to
yeah,
some
yeah.
election
About the
integrity experts?
interviews. Yeah, I mean, I already did, as I said, shows looking at the statistics. I think it's episodes 37 and 38 of my show. Um, but yeah, I'd love to have Greg Palast on my show. I don't know if I can get him on, but that would be great. There's also a fellow there where you are. I think he's at Ohio State. Bob Vitrakis, I think is his name.
Yep.
Would like to talk to him about the election integrity issues. So yeah, and of course, I'm perfectly willing to talk with Fiorella and Pasta about that, and other people. So. So yeah, I definitely
Yeah.
want to address that in the future because I mean, that's something that it was a major motivator for me to run for office in 2002. It was, I saw what happened in Florida in 2000 that the Democrats as well as the Republicans covered up. They didn't talk about the fact that tens of thousands of predominantly African Americans in Florida were falsely accused of being felons and thrown off the voter registration lists. Um, and there have been various reasons that people have made up over the years to throw people off the registration lists illegitimately. The latest one is, oh, you didn't return our postcard asking to confirm your registration. You must have moved. So sorry, you're out. Um,
That happens in Ohio. I
yeah,
think
yeah,
there
definitely.
was like 500,000 people tossed off the voter rolls over two different like purges. And it
Wow,
was
half a
it
million.
was yeah. Yeah, it was a lot, and it just like you said, it was we're gonna send out a postcard, and if you don't respond, then you're out. And
Yeah,
a lot of these people were just tossed off of the voter registration for no reason. I've personally in Ohio had issues. I voted in 2008. I voted in 2012. I mean, like I voted, and then and I think it was in 2016. I went to go and vote, or maybe it was 2012. But I had gotten married, and I had changed my name and everything, and I had voted like the election before, and everything was fine. And then when I went to go vote again, they didn't have me under my married name, and I'm like,
oh,
but
man.
I just voted in the last election under my married name.
Yeah,
So, it's like there's shenanigans. Ohio is terrible about that. There's all kinds of
yeah,
shenanigans around elections and voter rolls and all of that stuff. It's terrible.
yeah,
It's one of the worst, I think. So, yeah, I
yeah,
think election integrity is a massive issue that nobody talks about really, and I think it's just not
yeah,
it's not sexy. Like it's a lot of math and statistics and
yeah,
it's not fun, but
yeah.
it's a
Which,
hugely important
I mean,
issue.
I don't think it's so not fun, but that's um,
Yeah, I mean, it's just
but
not like it's not, like flashy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Like people, it's like, oh yeah, whatever. But it's a
yeah,
hugely important issue that people just don't ever talk about. So,
yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm
And the
really excited to.
2004 election there in Ohio, is something that even people on the left don't talk about, don't even seem to know about. Other than the people who specifically work on election integrity, the fact of the matter is that John Kerry should have been our president. If it
Hmm.
weren't for Ohio having, massive voter suppression, the likelihood is YouTube. I'm not saying I know this for a fact, but the likelihood is that
Fuck
Kerry
YouTube.
would have won Ohio and thus the election.
Yeah. No, yeah, 100%. And being in Ohio, I know that, but you're right. Most people don't know that unless you're following election integrity pretty closely. Most people just aren't aware of how, like, legitimately how terrible it is. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm looking forward to the shows that you're going to do on that because it's something that I think definitely needs to be talked about more. Definitely.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Definitely.
yeah. So,
And of course, uh, I want to talk about, and hopefully you guys will talk about as well, the recent election in Ecuador. I need to dig into that a little bit and talk about that. And I also never got around to doing a show about Bolivia finally overturning its coup. One of my first shows was about the U.S.-backed fascist coup in
mhm.
Bolivia. That was it was just horrible. But hey, they had a woman president, an illegitimate woman president. So hey, they did their thing for identity politics. But
Yeah.
too bad she was a fascist.
More women war criminals. It's good. It's good
Yeah,
times. But yeah, Ben Norton would be, I mean, I don't know how easy it would be to get Ben Norton, but he's been doing
yeah,
excellent on the ground reporting down there. So if you're not following him, you should definitely be following him. And
yeah,
also, if I can just make a little recommendation, we just talked to Robbie Yeager about the Colonial Pipeline spill in North Carolina. I don't know if you saw that.
yeah,
It is
yeah.
a
Actually, I was listening to
massive.
that when I was out on my. It would have been a run except for all the snow. My walk today.
Nobody's talking about it.
Yeah,
I mean, I when we when Robbie first tweeted about it, and then we contacted him and we like started talking to him about, doing the show. It's a massive story, and no, it's
yeah,
1.2 million gallons.
yeah,
And nobody's talking about it. So, I
yeah,
mean, I
yeah.
know
Well,
that he would
as
love to get the story out.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
Well, as Robbie was saying when you interviewed him, I mean, it's like another psychological issue while playing a role in politics. It didn't make a big splash. It didn't like wreck uh, the Gulf of Mexico or something. So it didn't really you know, come to people's attention very much. It was
yeah.
just underground. We have contamination. Nobody sees it.
It's
So
terrifying. It's terrifying that 1.2 million gallons, can just, and nobody's talking, nobody. I mean, mainstream media, independent media, Bill McKibben, Sunrise Movement,
yeah,
AOC. Ed Markey, none of them. No one's talking about it. So yeah, I mean, I'm sure Robbie would love to come on your show because he's really
Yeah.
trying to get the story out there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it
Oh,
is still
definitely.
developing, but yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
that's
Let me know how
everybody
I
should be
can get
keeping
in
an eye
touch
on
with
them.
Robbie. Yeah, that would be great. Now, was that
Yeah.
a natural gas pipeline or an oil or pipeline
Yes.
or what?
Yep. Nope. Natural gas.
Natural gas? Okay.
Yep. Yep. It's really terrifying, actually. And he's right. I mean, when we were talking to him, there are so many of these pipelines just crisscrossing the country all over the place. And like just this pipeline alone, I think it was 88% of the pipeline in North Carolina where the spill is over 40 years old.
Yeah.
And they only have to examine it like once every 5 years, and they don't even
Mhm.
examine the entire length of the pipeline.
Yeah.
It's just bits and pieces of it. So,
Yeah.
it's terrifying. And it's like Robbie said, this one may not have, damaged major waterway or, whatever, but there's going to be a next one. And
Yeah.
the next one could be catastrophic.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, this is something that we really need more eyes on. So yeah, if you want to get Robbie on, I think that would be excellent. We really need to start talking about that more.
Yeah.
So yeah, as we wrap up, do you want to just tell everybody where they can find you on Twitter and find your Medium blog? Like I said, we'll link to all that stuff, but if you just want to give everybody, just a quick how they can find you online.
Yeah. Yeah. On Twitter, I'm at Lefty Vegan. All one word. On Facebook, which I'm not on as much as on Twitter. I'm just under my name, Jeff Melton. And I'm my show is The Bitter Pill. I forget the exact address of it, but I've got it linked in my Twitter profile, on YouTube. And I just recently, started uploading my shows to Odyssey. That's ODYSEE.com. And I'm at The Bitter Pill, is my channel name there. And then, as I mentioned, I do some writing as well, and most of it I have put on my blog, which is just jeffmelton.medium.com. So, yeah, check it all out.
Yes, definitely. And
Oh,
we would. Oh, go ahead.
I, with all the things that we've talked about, I'm amazed that we didn't get to talk about the censorship that's been happening lately, which is
Oh, we can. You want to?
yeah,
I
yeah,
didn't
sure,
want to take too much of your time. I always feel bad because we go really long and people are like,
yeah,
wow, it was like 2 hours. Yeah, let's do it. Let's totally
yeah,
do
yeah.
that.
I mean, that's one of the reasons why I, started, uploading stuff to Odyssey and getting on there. And I'd like if they'll let me. They seem to be pretty picky about who they let on, but trying to get on Rockfin too. Um,
It's not necessarily that they're picky. Like, don't think that it's like this exclusive club. I think that they're just trying not to overwhelm themselves being a new platform. So they're
yeah,
trying to just kind of slowly build up, so
yeah,
that they don't screw it up. You know what I mean?
right, yeah. But yeah, I can't believe I didn't think to mention this, but at the same time, pretty much that Combo Couch and Graham Elwood and all those folks got demonetized by YouTube. I had one of my videos taken down by YouTube, and other than the fact that I wasn't, it didn't say anything about demonetization because I don't have a big enough audience to be monetized yet. I got pretty much the same form letter from YouTube. Let me see if I can find it. Well, I mean, I don't want to take up a whole lot of time about it, but
No.
basically
You're
it's
fine.
just
You're fine. I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You can, if you
Okay.
want to
I
look
mean,
it up. That's I'm not. I mean, I probably have like 10 or 15 minutes. I have a vigil tonight at 9. So,
yeah.
but
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
to me that seemed like such a coordinated attack. Because
Yeah.
everybody got their emails at the exact same time. Um,
Yes.
you know, it,
Yeah.
it was it was interesting. I mean, I know that sounds very like tinfoil hat, but it seems to me like it's very clear that independent media is under full frontal attack on YouTube, no question. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad that you are getting on Odyssey. Everybody should be decentralizing their information sources. Go get on the Rockfin. More content creators will be added. Like I said, I don't think it's meant to be like this exclusive club or anything. I really just think that they're trying to be smart about the fact that they're a new
Yeah.
platform and they don't want to, fuck it up. You know what I'm saying? And
Yes.
just kind of overwhelm themselves. It took us a long time to get on, and the only reason we really
Yeah.
did is because of Nico. So,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the only
All
reason I
right.
think.
Well, if y'all can put in a good word for me with Rockfin, that would be much
Absolutely.
appreciated.
I mean, I don't have any
Um,
pull, but I can try.
okay. Let me briefly read the good parts of this from YouTube. Hello, the Bitter Pill. We have reviewed your appeal for the. No, wait a minute. That's the. Hi, Bitter Pill. We wanted to let you know our team reviewed your content and we think it violates our spam deceptive practices and scams policy. What they mean by that is that their computer algorithm thinks that.
Hmm.
And uh, we have removed the following content from YouTube. Video, what can exit polls tell us about the 2020 election? Bitter Pill episode 37. We realize this may be disappointing news, blah, blah, blah. Um, uh, what our policy says, content that advances false claims that widespread fraud, errors, or glitches change the outcome of the U.S. 2020 presidential election is not allowed on YouTube. And, my video made no such claims. So I responded to them, hello, you claim that my video violated your spam deceptive practices and scams policy, say that content that, what I said before, but I made no such claim. I claimed that Biden legitimately won the election and presented statistical analysis that showed incontrovertibly that Biden got fewer votes and Trump more votes than what the exit polls predicted they would. I'm a social scientist, and you pull out my scientist card on them, trained in statistical analysis and presented findings based on real data showing that Biden, who won, may possibly have won by more than the official vote count. There was no deception and were no false claims in this video. Watch it and see for yourself. So, they actually wrote me back pretty promptly and said, we've reviewed your appeal after taking another look. They mean after we took our first look at your video.
Right.
We can confirm that your content does not violate our community guidelines. Thanks for your patience. And, they reinstated my content. So, sometimes we can fight back against this, but, I think it's going to keep happening. So,
Yeah,
that's
it's
one reason
absolutely going to keep happening. Something I find interesting is
platforms.
Steve's show, Steve Poikin and Slow News Day, on multiple occasions has been hit with that warning about QAnon on a show where he didn't even mention QAnon.
Yeah,
It's
I've been hit with that
amazing.
twice. They have posted a Wikipedia article about QAnon, once on my video about cognitive dissonance and infighting in the left, so nothing to do with QAnon there.
Right?
And the other was on my actually was on my video responding to all the censorship that's been going on. So, I guess I can understand why they retaliated against me for that. But they claimed that they were putting this QAnon Wikipedia article to provide the viewers with context
Right.
about my video, which is absolute bullshit because I said nothing whatsoever about conspiracy theories really in any video I've done. And if I did, as a psychologist, I would be saying, look, conspiracy theories are largely bullshit, and here's the psychological principles explaining why people believe them.
Yes. I just really find it unbelievably terrifying that some Silicon Valley tech bro gets to decide what we are allowed to talk about and what we're not allowed to talk about. Because I
Yeah.
don't even care. Like if you're discussing the fact that you think, even if you're wrong, but if you're discussing the fact that you think that the election was rigged against Donald Trump and you're not calling for any kind of violence or you're not, I mean, if you're just discussing it, that should be okay. I mean,
Yes.
that should be something that you're allowed to do. I mean, we have
Yeah.
free speech in this country. You should be allowed to have those conversations. And the fact that
Yeah.
we have these, tech bros and some, well, really, it's just an algorithm. Even then, once you appeal it, it's just some dude like in a office in Silicon Valley deciding, what we get to know and what we don't get to know, what information we're allowed to have access to and what we're not allowed to have access to. That should terrify everybody. I mean, I
Yeah.
don't think that I mean, obviously, I'm a free speech activist, so nothing should be off limits, really, as long as, and we already have laws on the books for inciting violence and all of those things. So nothing should be off limits. We should be able to have those conversations about whatever we want to
even
talk
if
about.
you're presenting something that's demonstrably false, you should be allowed to say it. I mean, come on, what did what does the mainstream media do all the fucking time?
Right.
They tell us things that are obviously provably false to
Russiagate.
anybody who digs
Yes.
into it.
Yes. I mean, that somebody got mad at Nico because ages ago he did a video where he didn't push Russiagate, or not Russiagate, but Pizzagate, which is what they were trying to say. He just covered it. Like, he talked about it. He discussed the fact that, in the Podesta emails, there's some weird language that also kind of corresponds with FBI, like child pedophilia and trafficking language, which is certainly interesting. It's not like, I'm not saying that that's what it is, but he was just covering it, like just talking about the issue. And they were like, oh, but he pushes conspiracy theories. And I'm like, and they're like, he deserves to be demonetized. Well, then I need you to have that same energy for MSNBC and CNN and TYT and Humanist Report for pushing Russiagate, because that's exactly, they were pushing a conspiracy theory, and Russiagate was far more dangerous and damaging than Pizzagate was. I mean, are you kidding? You're literally like Cold War. Pizzagate was, it was like a blip on the radar. And I'm not saying it wasn't, like the guy went in with a gun and all of that stuff. Like, that's, scary, but that's entirely different than 4 years of trying to instigate shit with nuclear power. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, if we're going to demonetize anything, let's demonetize the Pentagon. Let's demonetize the NSA.
Please.
Let's demonetize YouTube.
You know what I'm saying? Yes. Like, it's this amazing thing. It's, again, the consistency. It's this, because I disagree with these people, then they deserve to be demonetized for the exact same thing that these people that I like, I'm going to defend and cheerlead for. It's that cognitive dissonance thing again. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just a really frustrating thing to watch, especially from the left, because maybe I was naive, but I really thought that the left was better than that. And over the certainly the past 4 years, I have definitely learned that that's not the case.
Yeah. Yeah. And, he gets a lot of flack for it because he really fucked up by saying this. But Jordan Chariton, tweeted out on the 6th day of the riots that people should be censored if they're promoting conspiracy theories that lead to people being upset enough to try to overturn the results of elections. And to his credit, he eventually apologized for it. It took him a while because, he's got kind of a big ego, but, eventually he apologized for that.
His apology was kind of trash, though. Like, it was very backhanded, and, and I think the only reason that he apologized is because Jimmy Dore called him out, and then he lied to Jimmy Dore's face, and, he was getting trashed because Jimmy Dore asked him, did you say that people should be deplatformed for talking about election integrity? And he's like, no, I said that if people incited violence, they should be held accountable. No, that's not what you said, homie. That's not what you said.
He did this.
So I think that's the only reason why he apologized.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, maybe. But he did this thing, all along where he said, well, I made that one tweet, but you're misrepresenting me if you only talk about that. It's like, well, why can't we talk about that? You said it, Yeah. Okay, fine. You said other things that made clear that you have a more nuanced perspective later, but you still need to apologize for presenting a completely unnuanced perspective in the first place. And for whatever reason,
and I think it's interesting that he only cared once it affected him personally. Like, he got censored, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, so maybe I was wrong. Which, listen, I mean, I'll give him a little bit of credit. You're right. He deserves a little bit of credit for kind of apologizing.
Yeah.
But, hopefully he'll learn his lesson from this,
Yeah.
because there are too many people on the left cheering censorship, and that is really terrifying. And I have people on the left calling me a cultist
Hmm.
for
Oh
fighting
yeah.
for free speech and press freedom. It's
Yeah. Great
really
cult, the free
bizarre.
speech cult.
I know. It's like the best cult in the history of cults. I gotta say, it really is. I'm like the greatest cult leader ever.
All right. Well, sign me
Oh,
up, fearless leader.
okay. You're in. You're in. Ay, ay, ay. Okay, well, I do have to get off here so I can go get ready
Yeah.
for a vigil. But again, I do want to thank you for coming on. You're welcome back anytime. If there's ever anything you want to come and just bullshit about, we're happy to have you back. Hopefully, Jesse will have internet next time and he'll be able to join us.
Yeah.
And yeah, if you want me to get you in touch with Robbie to get him on your show,
Yeah,
I'm
for
happy to
sure.
do that for you too.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, that's a huge story. So 100%. But yeah, I just want to thank you for joining us again. Everybody
Yeah.
check out Jeff's
Thank you for
work.
having me on, Misty.
Yeah, of course. His show again is The Bitter Pill. You can also find him on Twitter at Lefty Vegan. All of his links and stuff are there. And again, I will link all that stuff in the show notes so that everybody can have like a quick and easy access to all of his work. His show is great, so you should definitely be checking that out. And yeah, I guess we will catch you next time. Thanks so much for watching.
All right. Thanks, Misty.
Yeah.